Hello, and welcome to Slumber Stories. My name is Owen, and I am a storyteller. I hope you've had a good day. If not, don't worry. Tomorrow will be better. I am going to tell you some stories to help you relax and maybe fall asleep. Today's stories come from a book called Bob and Mr. Bunny. It was written in 1927. The copy I have was given to Joyce Herbert for Christmas of that year by her Gran. So I dedicate the stories to Joyce and her Gran, wherever they may be. My friend, I would like you to sit back, close your eyes if it's safe to do that, and just relax. Open your imagination to the stories. They are simple tales, the ones you would like to hear as a child. And hopefully they will send you to slumber. Take care, my friends, and enjoy the stories. Bob and Mr. Bunny. There was once a little boy called Bob, and a rabbit called Mr. Bunny. Bob lived with his father and mother in a little house near the wood, and Mr. Bunny lived with his wife and 7 children under the roots of an old oak tree. No one would have thought that Bob and Mr. Bunny were alike, but they were very much alike in one thing. They were always saying, "I wish. I wish I was a little boy," sighed Mr. Bunny every morning. "Then I could stay in that garden on the other side of the fence, where there are such beautiful dandelions in the grass. I wish I was a rabbit," sighed Bob every evening. "Then I shouldn't have to go to bed at 7, but I could play in the wood as long as I liked. I wish this, and I wish that," sighed Mr. Bunny all day long. "And I wish I was, and I wish I had," sighed Bob. "I know what I wish," snapped Mrs. Bunny one morning. "I wish you would go outside, unless you can find something better to do than grumble." At that very moment, Mummy was holding her hands over her ears. "Bobby, darling, that's the 9th time you've said 'I wish' since breakfast. Do run out and play." That is how Bob and Mr. Bunny came to be wandering in the wood, feeling even more grumbly than usual. They were not noticing where they were going, and so they nearly bumped into each other. "Oh," cried Bob, "a rabbit." "It's bad enough to be a rabbit without being reminded of the fact," snapped Mr. Bunny. "I wish I was a little boy." "How funny," said Bob. "I wish I was a rabbit." "What a stupid wish," cried Mr. Bunny. "It must be the nicest thing in the world to be a little boy. You haven't any fur to keep clean, for one thing. I've got clothes instead, sighed Bob, and they've got such a lot of buttons. I'd much rather have fur. Wait until you've tried it, said Mr. Bunny. The time it takes to lick oneself every morning. Should I have to lick myself if I was a rabbit? Asked Bob. How horrid. Why couldn't I just get washed in water? Water? Cried Mr. Bunny. It makes my whiskers curl to think of it. But you could have dust baths. There's nothing like a dust bath to make you feel fresh. If I was a little boy, I'd have a dust bath every morning in that beautiful piece of dug-up earth in your garden. But, said Bob, if you were a little boy and you played in the dust, you'd have to be washed with water afterwards, and your mummy would scold you for spoiling your clothes. I'm beginning to think it must be very uncomfortable to be a little boy, even if you do live in the garden with lots of dandelions, said Mr. Bunny. Do you like dandelions? Asked Bob in surprise. I think they're horrid. Horrid? They're delicious, cried Mr. Bunny. What stupid things boys are. I'm glad I'm a rabbit. And he turned away and scampered into the bushes. And I'm glad I'm a boy, Bob called after him. Even if you can stay up as late as you like, I don't want to be a rabbit one bit. Neither Bob nor Mr. Bunny ever told about their meeting in the wood, and Mummy and Mrs. Bunny are still wondering what cured them so quickly of saying, I wish. Niddickin's Nod. Niddickin's Nod is a little wee man. He drives o'er the moonlight, as fairy folk can. His coach it is painted, his horses are white. They really do make a most beautiful sight. He drives past the houses, at each one he waits, of course by the windows, and not by the gates, and cries to his goblins, some thick and some thin, pray see if good children are sleeping within. The goblins they listen, by windows and doors, until they make sure of some good little snores, and then through the chimneys and windows they climb, and bring out good children, just one at a time. The children are packed in that coach gay as gay. Then Niddickin's Nod, he goes driving away. Oh, hurry my horses, as fast as you can, to my castle of dreams, cries the Niddickin's man. They drive past the chimneys and past the tree tops. Too fast, cry the trees, but the coach never stops. They drive past the steeple and leave it below, and the church clock looks up just to see where they go. But soon the coach reaches that castle of dreams. 'Tis just by the moon, or at least so it seems. Old Niddickin's Nod takes the children within and the loveliest playtimes and revels begin. At last it is sunrise, it soon will be day, and Nidikin's nod cries, "Let's hasten away." The gay little goblins, some thick and some thin, bring the coach to the door, and set the children within. Old Nidikin's nod laughs as he drives through the sky. The treetops cry out, "Something fairy passed by." But all the grey chimneys declare that's absurd. That was only the note of a wee little bird. The Little Owl's Adventure. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. "What's that?" asked the little owl. "Time," said his father. That was the day the little owl first knew his home was in the church tower, just below the clock that ticked. He liked to hear it. He liked the bells on Sunday too, for then they went chime, chim-chime, up in the tower above him. There came a day when he could fly. Very proud of himself he was. Every evening, just as it was getting dark, Mr. and Mrs. Owl would stand on the edge of the nest, with their baby between them, ready to start and seek out their supper. On the night of the little owl's adventure, his father and mother had stood on the edge of the nest as usual, and he had squeezed himself between them, all ready to start out, when Mr. Owl had said, "Not tonight, my son," and he and Mrs. Owl had flown away without him. The little owl did not like being left behind. He thought it was very hard to be left alone when he was not a bit sleepy and so hungry for his supper. "I shall go by myself," he said. So he flew away to the sycamore tree. There he stopped while he decided where he should go. "I'll go to the barn on the hillside," he said to himself. The door stood wide open when he flew in, and he perched on a beam in the roof and looked around him. He listened very hard. Soon there would be plenty of mice. He waited. Then someone came down the yard and shut the door with a bang. It was very dark, but the little owl did not mind that. He could see better now that the door was closed, but he was rather afraid to be left there all by himself, for he was not quite sure how to get out again. He grew afraid. "To-wit, twoo, to-wit, twoo," he called. Perhaps someone would hear him. He did it again. Then the door opened, and in came a man with a lantern and carrying a little girl in his arms. "Look, Betty," he said, "a dear little owl." "What big eyes he has," said Betty. The little owl did not like being looked at. The light dazzled his eyes, and he did so wish that he dare fly above their heads, away through the doorway, all the way home. Then he heard the church clock chiming, and afar off, "Tu-wit-tu, tu-wit-tu," which came from the tower. "Tu-wit-tu, tu-wit-tu," he called in reply, and off he flew out through the door and away past the sycamore tree, home. Mr. and Mrs. Owl were so glad to see him, they quite forgot to scold him, and soon he was telling them of his adventure as they sat in the snug nest together, while up above the clock ticked busily on. The Tinker's Child. The tinker's child has a ragged gown, her little feet go bare. The king's white daughter wears a crown upon her yellow hair. Her palace walls are broad and high, but tinkers sleep beneath the sky. The tinker wanders soon and late, he wanders far and wide, mending kettle and pot and plate for all the countryside. His little daughter in the sun is free to laugh and leap and run. She's often hungry, often cold. The king's child sits apart in her stiff white gown and shoes of gold, and sees with aching heart the tinker's child go running by under a grey and windy sky. The London Child. Nurse kissed my cheek and said good night. She tucked me up and took the light through 4 dark walls and round my bed, yet still outside the meadows spread. Across the moonlit floor I sped, and climbing to the window sill, I listened to the water mill, and watched the tall black elms uprise, that rock the rooks twixt earth and skies, while in the garden down below, where roses intertwine and blow, I'm sure the fairies come and go. Then pillowing my tumbled head, this joyous thought I took to bed. Tomorrow, and tomorrow still, the stars will shine, the wind will blow, no long grey streets with lights aglow, no ugly houses all a row, no footsteps echoing to and fro, but flowers and trees, and hill and dell, and hollows where the fairies dwell.